Hello, everyone. Can you hear me okay? Good. So welcome to our discussion about the value of creativity in education and how policy might best be shaped to support that. This event is part of the ESRC's Social Science Festival and is brought to you by King's Policy Institute with support from Burberry, so thank you to them. My name is Beatrice Pembroke. I head up the King's Culture work here. So we support collaborations between the university and the broader creative and cultural industries for social and cultural impact. And I'm really pleased that we could host this event here at the Science Gallery, newly reopened, and really a kind of greenhouse for King's to grow new ideas across art, science and health. And it has a particular focus on young people and really hopes to be a space that can be shaped for, with and by them, and to hone their capacities in collaboration, critical thinking, curiosity, and agency. I think all of us would acknowledge that young people are facing some particular challenges at the moment, a very uncertain, precarious, and fast-changing world that they're going into. And it therefore seems even more vital that we understand how creativity, how cultural, or at least access to a sort of broad cultural education might be valuable, and why perhaps we haven't yet reached the potential of doing that. We have some brilliant speakers to help us explore that. And first of all, we're going to take a kind of deep dive into a case study from Burberry Inspire, which was a 4-year project in West Yorkshire. And we have Burberry and some of the partners speaking to us about how that went. And then we'll come back and have a discussion. Over to you.
Thank you so much. And hello, everybody. So I'm Vicky Speed, and I'm the Responsibility, Communication and Reporting Manager at Burberry, repping the brand today. I'm so delighted to be here to talk to you a little bit about Burberry Inspire. I'll start with a confession, and that is that I've only been at Burberry for 5 months. I can't take credit for any of this programme, but I'm really delighted to be able to share a bit more about it with you all today. This happened to me earlier as well. Big click. Here we go. So before we dive into the programme, I just wanted to talk a little bit about Burberry, the brand. So I'm sure many of you are familiar with the kind of renowned check pattern that you can see on the building there. But actually, Burberry, it's not just a fashion company. We are a purpose-led brand. And we really believe that creativity opens spaces. So it's our shared belief in the power of creativity and creative thinking to open new possibilities. So we are a global brand with a very deep British heritage, and we were founded in 1856 by Thomas Burberry. And actually, our brand is really underpinned by the strong and enduring values of him still today. He served his community throughout his life, and he passionately believed in inclusivity and bringing people of different backgrounds together. And then just a little bit about Burberry Foundation as well. So Burberry Foundation was set up in 2008 as an independent charity for general charitable purposes and grant making. Its strategic vision is focused on enabling and empowering the next generation to explore new possibilities, to unlock their creativity and to drive positive change to help them build a better future. The foundation really believes that young people who have positive role models, safe spaces and opportunities to develop and exercise their creativity can become very self-confident individuals. Honestly. So anyway, a little bit about the programme. So Burberry Inspire. So it launched in 2018 as a groundbreaking 4-year programme of arts and culture experiences designed to change the way a cohort of young people in Yorkshire see the world and understand their potential. So it's funded by the Burberry Foundation and co-designed with our delivery partner Ideas Foundation, who are also in the room with us today. And it focused on 8 schools in Leeds, Keighley and Castleford. And these areas are actually really close to Burberry's heart. Our iconic trench coat is still made in Yorkshire today, and we're super, super proud of that. Just keep smiling. So These are the names of the schools that participated in the programme. I won't read them all out, but you can see them on the screen, and I believe some staff members from those schools are here in the room today, so we're super delighted to have you here with us to celebrate this moment. So as leaders in the field of arts education, Northern Ballet, Leeds Playhouse, Leeds Young Film and the Hepworth Wakefield were chosen to nurture the creative ambition and skills of the students through dance, theatre, film and art. So they had artists in residence that worked really closely with the schools as they responded to a new creative brief each year. So through workshops and day trips, after-school clubs and virtual lessons, we really opened the doors for collaborative and interactive art experiences to students who otherwise wouldn't necessarily had those opportunities. And of course, as I mentioned, we're now at the end of the 4 years of that programme, and actually throughout it was imperative that we were able to measure its success and impact during that time. And so I know Niall will go into a little bit more detail shortly after myself, but the Policy Institute have led a longitudinal study, I said it, that evaluates the effects of the programme on students' self-esteem, aspiration and internal locus of control. Some very fancy big words there that I can't do justice to, but I know Niall will do so. But before moving on to Niall, I'm really delighted now to hand over to both Leanne and Amy from 2 of our cultural partners. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Vicky. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Leanne Kirkham from Northern Ballet.
I'm Amy Lancelot from Leeds Playhouse.
And we've also got representatives from our other cultural partners here today. So we've got some people from the Hepworth and from Leeds Young Film, so they'll be around to chat to afterwards as well. So, oh, you've got the clicker. Thank you. So Burberry Inspire enabled arts partners and our local schools to work together in a way that had simply not been possible before. Working collaboratively to mould and develop the delivery model for this project was nothing short of a gift. We were given a template of key activities to be delivered over each year of the programme, which the arts partners could then kind of take away and deliver in a way that was best suited to their own art forms. These activities kind of broadly covered 3 key areas and levels of engagement. So firstly, there were cultural experiences where pupils visited theatres, galleries and various different events, allowing them to really experience the world-class culture on their own doorsteps up in West Yorkshire. They saw ballets, musicals, plays, they experienced world-class art and saw some groundbreaking films, and this provided the initial inspiration for the future engagement within the programme. Secondly, there was the cultural delivery. So a lot of this happened in school, so lots of kind of work within curriculum time, but also some after-school work as well, which enabled children to delve that little bit deeper into certain disciplines or subjects that they were really interested in. There were also residencies at our cultural venues, and these were really designed to kind of throw the doors open and really kind of demystify what happens in a cultural venue, kind of what they look like, what they feel like, and also to demonstrate the real wide range of jobs and career opportunities that there are in the creative industries. And there was CPD for teachers as well, and that was really hoping to enable and encourage more arts and creative teaching pedagogy within the schools themselves. The third and final part of those kind of engagement levels was a cultural runway. So this is where everyone came together for a real celebratory performance. Everyone was able to share what they'd learned, what they'd created in a professional space. So how did we achieve this? Well, over the 4 years, each school engaged with a different arts partner each year, with much of the activity taking place within the curriculum time. And this was absolutely key to the success of Burberry Inspire, because it meant that every child in Key Stage 3 had the chance to take part. Another really key aspect was that the funding covered every part of the programme, including travel. And that, again, was really key, because travel costs can be completely prohibitive to schools accessing things outside of the school environment. So that was really, really key. We used an artist in residence model, so embedding professional artists within the school. So they became a familiar face, and the pupils had access to working with world-class practitioners in their classrooms. There was a wide range of specialists that we worked with, a range of visual artists, so from sculpture, textiles, printmaking, ceramics, mark making, movement, calligraphy, photography, digital production, and then all sorts of kind of film and theatre related practitioners as well, set and costume designers, directors, choreographers, playwrights, composers, like I could go on. But I'm going to hand over to Amy, who's going to tell you a bit more about kind of the impacts and some case studies.
Brilliant. Thank you, Leanne.
So I thought let's start with imagining the journey of a single student. Okay, imagine our student is on a transition visit to their secondary school. Our student, let's call her Betty. Betty gets a treat because she gets to see some Year 7 students performing a devised movement piece that has been co-produced with Leeds Playhouse. And she thinks, I could never do that. That would take some bravery. I'm not going to stand up and do that. But then when she joins Year 7, she has this brilliant experience. She gets to meet professionals from Leeds Young Film. She gets an entire day off timetable to work with them, and she loves films, and she had no idea how much goes into actually making a film and bringing it to life. Then in her 3rd year, she is really interested. She gets an artist, an actual real-life artist, not a teacher, an artist, who comes in and delivers a term of art classes on sculptures. Betty didn't really know anything about sculpting, and actually goes on a visit to the Hepworth Wakefield. Again, she's never been that far on a school trip before, but also she gets to see sculpting in the real world. And as a bonus, when school closed because of the pandemic, she also gets to take home an activity kit that includes her own kind of art sculpting gear. She's never had that at home before. So then when it comes to the final 4th year, when she's in Year 9, she gets to meet one of the dancers from Northern Ballet, and they're delivering sessions in PE. Now, she would have been terrified of dance normally, but she doesn't need to be now, because actually she remembers when she was acting in that film, and that was really fun. And when she learned about that new art form that she'd never even heard of, and it was a bit weird, but it was brilliant. And she thinks, actually, yeah, maybe I will volunteer, so that I will be on the stage of the Quarry Theatre at Leeds Playhouse, performing in that final cultural runway. Because although I'm still scared, maybe I am actually brave enough to do that. So hopefully that gives you an idea of the kind of experience that some of our young people might have gone on. But I'm here to talk more generally as well about the impact on not only the students, but also the schools and the arts partners. So in terms of the impact on arts partners, we feel very, very grateful for having been taken part in this project. The ability to share our work more widely, to really be able to talk about what we do, to talk about the impact of it, to be able to share it on media with the support of the Burberry assets, generally to be able to really get our work out there and talk about it more, not only externally, but also internally within our organisations. The engagement teams and the learning teams of all of our organisations are only a small part of what we do. We also got to then improve our own artistic practice. So we were able to work with schools and teachers in a really in-depth way and learn and listen, and therefore build up what our offer could be. I know the Hepworth in particular, for example, have really allowed that to form and develop their programme moving forward. So they're using that artist in residency, and they're also expanding their careers offer. So we've really learned from this project. Thirdly, it's broadened our reach. We've worked with schools that we would have never dreamed of working with in areas that we just know we had no engagement with before. It's been lovely to be able to expand outside for all of us. From Leeds Playhouse, obviously, it was mainly the Leeds City region, but we've gone further than that now, and that's really lovely. We were also, and this is perhaps an exciting new benefit, is that during lockdown we obviously got a chance to experiment with digital resources and online learning. We hadn't been doing very much of that beforehand, and we learned very quickly to start doing it. But the budget at the time and the guaranteed audience meant that it was really worthwhile, and we all developed such amazing skills very, very quickly. Finally, it was an opportunity for us to work as partners. We may exist in the same area of Britain, but actually the opportunity to work together, to learn from each other, to share, is something that I think we've all taken away and will really continue. That will be a major part of the legacy of this project, is something that we're really grateful for. In terms of the impact on schools then, we found lots of different things. First of all, the luxury of not having budget constraints. This project, brilliantly funded, allowed those schools to say, actually, we'd love to work with a gospel choir or a calligrapher. We'd love to go and see what's happening in this space. We were able to do all of that, and that, I think, is a crucial part of this project. It cannot be underestimated. That allowed us that freedom. What the schools gave, obviously, in return was time, and I think that is equally as important, and it needs to be recognised that there was real time given to the project to allow it to happen. The impact on teachers was also really positive. Obviously, they expanded their own experiences and knowledges, and again, we were able to help them out. If there's something they wanted to start working with, we could try and make that happen, along with, as Leanne's already mentioned, the in-depth CPD programme that was run throughout the 4 years. And finally, then, the legacy of the offer, and we're really excited about this. A lot of our schools have actually continued the work that we started. So some schools have continued with after-school clubs, for example. Carlton Keighley, formerly UAK, introduced a whole arts programme that they hadn't had previously, including music and drama, that we're super proud of. And I know Castleford Academy have launched a whole new project as well, which is dedicating 2 hours a week to the arts and an annual kind of commitment to visiting arts venues. So again, what's really reassuring is those schools can also see the benefit and are committed to it. Finally then is the impact on students. So we know that they had a whole load of exciting new opportunities. They had access to things they wouldn't normally have access to, purely because the strict timetables and the very clear focus on curriculum. What Burberry Inspire allowed them to do was explore totally different things. They also then got to visit world-class venues, see amazing exhibitions, see performance spaces, watch films, generally access parts of the world that they wouldn't normally have access to. They learnt directly from professional practices and experts. They were working with international artists. They co-produced work with those artists. There were young people who were choreographing a dance for the American Ballet Theatre in New York, in the very city of Leeds. That is amazing, and I don't know many young people have had the opportunity to do that. Finally, and I'd say possibly from my perspective, most importantly, they gained awareness of the various careers in the arts organisation. We know a lot of young people come through going, oh, I'd like to be an artist or an actor, but that seems to be the limit, and we think actually what we've allowed them to do is seed so many other opportunities and job roles going on in the world. Before I finish up, I just wanted to share with you 2 last case studies as well, if that's okay. One of them is Mike. Mike worked with the Leeds Playhouse when he was in Year 9, and Mike has social anxiety, and it's something that he's really aware of as a young person. And he actually, at the end of Year 8, chose to take drama in Year 9 to help him deal with that. Now, in the sessions, actually, he was really, really reliable, really hardworking. He was a really solid member of the cast. He took direction well and actually was one of the first to learn his lines. And clearly his anxiety helped him with some of that because it made him a really conscientious learner. But when it came to the performance, he was obviously really anxious, and what he did was he blew us all away. He came out on stage and he performed his heart out. He was clear, he was passionate, he was really engaging. And at the end, it was a joy for our artist in residence to see his mum rush up on stage, tearfully give him a hug, so proud of his performance, and him to declare, I just kicked my anxiety right where it hurts. Very well done, keeping his language appropriate as well. So we were super proud of Mike. In a similar sort of case study, there's Samira. Samira had never done anything with film studies, didn't know about how films were made, but she took part in Burberry Inspire in Year 1 and actually worked with Leeds Young Film. She became really interested in filmmaking, started to gain an interest in the different aspects of film, particularly directing, cinematography, even camera operating. And as this continued on, she asked more about the careers paths in the industries and was signposted by Leeds Young Film, but also by the school, to attend the after-school film club. And then, in addition, over summer, managed to get an opportunity with Oxygen Films and worked on a film set for an Amazon series. She ended up being the runner on that show, and from there was no looking back. Sparked her interest. She's now a creative producer for the BBC and has been recruited to work on Oxygen again. She has won a place on the British Film Industry Film Academy course in Leeds, and she is hoping that will help her network and work with other producers in the film industry. So there are great success stories from this. However, this is mainly obviously our experience as art partners. So I think it's important that we now hand over to Niall for the in-depth research and the information that hopefully will really help us to understand the full impact of this project. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Amy and Leanne and Vicky too. So my name's Niall. I'm a research associate at the Policy Institute, King's College London. And I've been working with Kirsty as well on this evaluation. And so I'm going to talk briefly about some of the results of our analysis today. So as Vicky has already mentioned, the Policy Institute was commissioned at the outset of the programme to undertake an evaluation to understand the impact of the programme was making on students taking part. To do this, we designed a mixed methods approach, which combined both qualitative and quantitative methodologies to explore this impact. Our quantitative evaluation focused on key non-cognitive or so-called soft skills, specifically students' self-esteem, aspiration, and locus of control, and the latter of which simply means the extent to which students believe they control their own destiny. To do this, over the 4 years of the programme, we collected more than 21,000 surveys from students in schools participating in Burberry Inspire, as well as over 5,500 surveys from students in 2 control schools. For our qualitative approach, we interviewed 151 highly engaged students and conducted almost 60 interviews with school staff and cultural partners. And these interviews allowed us to explore the underlying reasons for the results we see in the survey data and to allow a richer picture to emerge, which is grounded in the experience of students. On the quantitative approach, surveys were collected at the beginning and end of each school year to compare the effect of the programme in schools that took part, the treatment schools, with other local schools that did not, the control schools. This approach is known as a quasi-experimental difference in differences evaluation, which we use to estimate the impact the programme made in relation to the key non-cognitive skills already mentioned: aspiration, self-esteem, and locus of control. So the following charts map out the yearly trends for these measures for the control schools in light blue and the treatment schools in dark blue. And as the lines tracking these measures in the chart suggest, we do generally see these outcomes trending downwards over the course of the programme. However, this isn't necessarily surprising. There is strong evidence that aspirations and self-esteem generally do decline over the middle years of secondary education, and it seems likely that the pandemic and associated lockdowns would have confounded this trend. But when we compare the yearly trajectory of the treatment schools to the control line, we do see that students in the treatment schools have generally shown a positive effect at particular stages of the programme. These same yearly trends are represented in this table, which charts the effects of the intervention according to whether we detected statistically significant effects of the programme in treatment schools as compared with the control. This shows that of the 3 measures that we focused on as part of our analysis, locus of control emerged as the measure on which the programme had the most consistent effect. In other words, according to our quantitative research, the Burberry Inspire seems to have had a small positive effect on the extent to which students believe they control their own destiny in 2 out of the 3 years of the programme for which we have reliable data. Our qualitative analysis, as I said, was designed to uncover some of the mechanisms behind these trends and to try and uncover a more holistic picture of the impact of the programme on students, which is rooted in the experience of the people that took part. Many of these high-engaging students which we interviewed observed improvements in a range of key outcomes, both for themselves and for their peers. They observed improvements in key skills, both creative and transferable general skills. They reported improved confidence, new attitudes to art and performance, and a development of enhanced educational and professional aspirations, all identified as a result of taking part in the programme. Students in interviews emphasized a range of key characteristics or features of the activities that they took part in, which they valued or thought were particularly important or appealing. These included taking part in novel or new, different activities that for them were out of the ordinary, achieving a sense of agency over creating something original, meeting and working with new people in school, including the arts partners as well as their peers, and working with professional and highly skilled artists and residents. We believe this work provides suggestive evidence as to the value of creativity in education in terms of important non-cognitive outcomes, outcomes which research does suggest are linked to long-term health, economic, and social benefits. And we will continue to conduct further analysis on this data in the coming month, exploring in more detail the mechanisms behind these trends and the outcomes we have detected, all of which will be published in a detailed policy report later on this month. And now I'm going to hand back to Amy to wrap up.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm feeling the pressure now because this is the call to action. This is the really important bit, I suppose. This is the bit where we sum up everything and why this is so important. In this room, I know that we all know that arts are really important. We know that creativity creates humans, brilliant humans. We know that art and cultural subjects at schools help us to develop. But unfortunately, that's kind of theoretical, because in the wider real world, that isn't the case. And we know that the arts are seen as lovely add-ons, extracurriculars, not viable career paths. And we see this time and time again. We see it in schools who are crushed and condensed into feeling like they must be an exam factory. We see it in the constantly decreasing funding for arts programs and arts organisations. We see it on the focus on STEM constantly and continually, and even adding one single letter in there doesn't really change that. So the question is, how do we change it? How do we challenge this? And I think one of the things that's been highlighted is the way in which we evaluate, how and why we evaluate the impact of the arts. Because it is something that is inherently difficult to measure, and yet measure it we must to be able to prove its worth to those people who just don't quite see it. What I would say is we have seen firsthand the benefits of an arts-rich curriculum as part of Burberry Inspire. We have shown, we have supported, we have demonstrated young people finding their voice and advocating for themselves. They have learnt new skills and they've used these skills to overcome personal challenges and to imagine a future that has endless opportunities. And what we're hoping is that if we continue to work on projects like that, they will build their resilience and they will build their confidence to make that future a reality. And our job is to support them in doing that. Thank you so much for listening to us today.
Thank you so much for those presentations. I mean, really, what a brilliant and passionate set of experiences, and really it's given us so much to pick up on, which we will do shortly. I have 4 brilliant speakers representing both practice and policy making in education industry, each of whom is going to give us kind of a 5-minute provocation or opening statement on what they see as the benefits and challenges of creative education and how policy might best respond. We'll then have a discussion, and then I'm hoping that some of you will have some questions, so please get them ready. Jo Johnson, former Minister for Universities, Science and Innovation, and now Chair of Creative Access and Tests, I think, and many other things. Would you like to start?
Sure. Well, thank you very much for having me here, and it was great to have that presentation on the pilot that Burberry undertook in the north of England. Really inspiring, and I think gave very clear demonstration of the benefits of embedding creative skills in our education system. I want just to focus on 3 policy obstacles to mainstreaming the kinds of activities that you just heard about. And I'm going to focus particularly on the post-16 part of our education system, because it's the bit that I know best, and we've already just heard quite a lot about what's going on in our secondary schools. I see 3 big problems to embedding creative education and mainstreaming it more. First, we're in the process of undergoing, as many of you will know, a major review of what are known as applied general qualifications, known as BTECs, or often in the form of BTECs, with the introduction of a new qualification called T-levels, which is meant to be a qualification of similar weight to A-levels with the same sort of esteem. That's the broad policy objective, that you give a clear path to post-16 learners to either go down a T-level route, with technical vocational route, or don't go down a traditional A-level academic route. There has been a bit of blight, however, in the introduction of T-levels, because the government has wanted to create a sort of burning platform to drive their introduction by defunding BTECs before it's really clear exactly how many of the qualifications that support creative education are actually going to map over to the various T-level standards that are being rolled out in a number of waves between now and 2026, 2027. This is creating real blight in the sector, in the further education and independent training providers who support a lot of the BTECs that are providing this pipeline of talent into, TV, film, music, events, gaming, all the other bits of the creative industries that are such drivers of economic growth. We don't know exactly, for example, what T-levels will be available to support the BTECs that currently provide skills and training for young people who want to go into music performance, music technology, really important industries that the UK has world-leading positions in. So, right that the government wants to think hard about what's the best set of technical qualifications to offer to young people so that they have that parity of esteem. But we have a real problem in the pace at which T-levels are being introduced and the lack of clarity over exactly how the BTEC qualifications that we currently have are going to map over to existing standards. And that blight is causing a real problem for providers. That's the first problem. Second problem is in the lifelong loan entitlement, which many of you will have perhaps heard about. This is a major change in how we fund post-16 education in the UK, and it's going to be introduced from 2025 onwards. It's a big, big shift because traditionally we funded post-18 education in blocks of 1 year. This is going to enable funding to be offered in a much more modular way so that students will have a 4-year lifelong learning entitlement for funding, 4 years times a 1 year's worth of funding of 9,250, we expect. But broken down in a very flexible way, so students can take credits and fund individual credits, fund sub-components of courses. And that's hugely valuable, and it's a great and long overdue innovation in our system. The big problem, though, is that the Treasury is in an environment where it's going to want to save money in how these blocks of funding can be used. And the great fear that I have is that there are going to be a lot of restrictions on the use to which the lifelong loan entitlement can be put. So that, for example, it won't be available to fund courses which don't lead to certain high-earning outcomes, and it's likely in that scenario to disfavor a lot of the kinds of courses which embed creativity in them. So I'm concerned that there's going to be an excessive weight put on STEM courses in the list of qualifications and the list of courses that you can spend your lifelong loan entitlement on. And that really brings me to my last big concern, which is that the Treasury still has a framework for thinking about the value of education that's very much rooted in post-graduation earnings outcomes. And that is a framework of thinking about the value of education that is really very reductive and continues to put a massive disadvantage against providers of creative education, because it's not always clear that careers in the creative industries do lead to high earning paths relative to others, but it doesn't mean they're not immensely socially useful and valuable and create huge benefits to us as societies. So the Treasury's sort of conceptual framework for thinking about the value of education remains sort of a fundamental block to the delivery of and to the embedding of creative skills in our education system, and that is something which we really continue to need to champion, a change in that mindset. Last positive point is that the government is rightly putting a lot of emphasis on boosting apprenticeships. And there again, there's been a structural problem about the delivery of apprenticeships for the creative industries because of, the career paths in the creative industries are often very different to those of other industries, with people working for multiple employers, being self-employed, doing bits and pieces of work on their own. Very difficult to find an apprentice employer who's willing to make that financial commitment to an individual. So the government is piloting, and there are probably institutions here represented who are involved in this pilot, something called a flexi-job apprenticeship pilot that's specifically aimed at enabling the development and rollout of apprenticeships in the creative industries. And that, I think, is a good example of government recognizing that it needs to think slightly differently about how to support creativity in our education system.
Great, thank you. Lizzie Crump, lead for What Next, a brilliant sector organisation and forum, and a visiting fellow at King's.
Thank you so much.
How it feels from your perspective.
Thanks for having me. Firstly, I just want to say I've had my glasses prescription changed and they're not varifocal, so I've had to print my things out really big. So if I start dropping lots of notes, it's because I can't do the two things together. Thank you so much for asking me to join. One of the things I picked out when I was reading about this programme in the literature that was sent through to us is I find it really interesting that the Burberry Inspire project has the development of cultural capital embedded in its aims. So for colleagues that don't come across this term in their day-to-day lives, it's an interesting concept. So Ofsted, which is our national inspection service, which sends officials in to assess the quality of education in our schools, one of the things that this service looks at is the way that schools support the development of cultural capital in their children and young people. It informs the judgment that's made on how well that school is performing. So a couple of years ago, Sam Carnes, who was then my co-director at the Cultural Learning Alliance, did a bit of research on the term. And in the 1970s, Pierre Bourdieu, a French sociologist, developed the idea of cultural capital as a way to explain how power in society was transferred. So no small thing. Social classes maintained. Marx believed economic capital, money and assets, dictated your position in social order, but Bourdieu believed that cultural capital played an important and subtle role. And for both, the more capital you have, the more powerful you are. So Bourdieu defined cultural capital as familiarity with the legitimate culture within a society, so what you might have called like high culture. And he saw families passing on cultural capital to their children by introducing them to dance, to music, taking them to theatres, galleries, historic sites, and talking about literature and art over the dinner table. Now, Sam Carnes also cited the expansion of this idea of cultural capital by a range of academics who've added technical, emotional, national, and subcultural forms of cultural capital to the list. So that looks at things like marketable skills, IT, empathy, sympathy, groups built around specific cultural ideas where individuals need particular cultural knowledge and behaviours to belong to it. So cultural capital in this new sense is embodied by an individual who's knowledgeable about a wide range of culture and is comfortable discussing its value and merits. It's characterised by the experience and skill to be able to deploy that knowledge at the right time in any given situation. So a job interview, a conversation with a neighbour, building a work network, so on. Evidence suggests that cultural capital is passed on through families and helps children do better in school. The education system values the knowledge and ways of thinking developed by acquiring cultural capital, abstract and formal. And as adults, cultural capital helps individuals to network with others who have a similar body of knowledge and experiences and who in turn control access to those high-paying professions and prestigious leadership roles. So cultural capital can be turned into education and economic success. Now, studies by organisations in the UK, such as the Sutton Trust, have probed this issue of the types of education and family background can confer advantages onto these children. And there's a report that I would recommend called Parent Power that shows how wealthy parents can buy in extra schooling, including in art subjects, to push their children ahead of their peers in exams and to secure entry into the more prestigious schools and universities. Research such as The Class Ceiling by Sam Friedman and Daniel Laurison have shown how recruitment into top professions, including banking and law, is made easier by the level of cultural capital of the applicants. So at the end of her article, Carnes calls for the definition of cultural capital to celebrate and to embrace the different backgrounds, heritage, language and traditions of all the children living in this country. And she says that this is what's needed as a way to empower school and communities to define cultural capital for themselves. And that's very much what you guys were talking about and what we were seeing within this project. Now, I'm really interested to see what some of the outcomes of the project are when Ofsted comes into participating schools and looks at how the impacts of the judgment that they've made. And I was just talking to my colleague here who said Ofsted have come into his school and have absolutely picked up on this project and have reported on it in a really positive way. So for me, one of the really interesting elements of this project is it demonstrates to me that there are no structural barriers within the school accountability system that prevent teachers and cultural partners from taking a running with collaborative, structured, creative approaches to delivery of the curriculum, and I use that term in its widest possible sense. And I'm really interested to see how that investment that you talked about, that expertise and that time can be used to support and encourage and to reassure our school leaders that these approaches are valued by Ofsted and by others, as well as valuable to the students, teachers and communities involved. Fear of getting a bad grade in Ofsted is one of the things that really drives our school system. And if we can use evidence like this to say, actually, we're going to help you to achieve in the way that you're being asked, that's a real win. So what should we be thinking about as we go forward? As colleagues have alluded to, this is a really challenging time to be creating, delivering and advocating for innovative practice in schools, but it's never been more needed. We're operating at a time of unprecedented uncertainty. I feel like I use that phrase at the moment more than any other in all my work. We're still emerging from the effects of our ongoing pandemic, particularly seeing impact on mental health of our young people and our workforce. We've seen financial cuts and the rising costs of living and of energy affecting both our cultural and our education sectors. We're seeing shortages in key creative professions and a talent drain across the workforce as colleagues leave the sector to get jobs that are better paying and more stable. We need to think strategically and carefully about the infrastructure we need to deliver projects like this on a national scale. So yesterday, I was watching an evidence session of the Lord's Communication and Digital Committee, because that's what I do for fun. But my colleague, Eliza Easton from the Policy and Evidence Centre, made a really good point that the creative and cultural workforce is largely freelance, as colleagues have talked through. And when we're thinking about creative skills, competencies and behaviours we want to develop and enable in young people, we must remember that we need to equip them to be working in this way. We need excellent, fit-for-purpose careers information, advice and guidance, which is mapped to that latest research on the jobs that we need in the future for young people and their families. So I was asked to think about some of the policy change I would recommend in this space, and luckily, there's a piece of work taking place right now in government that has the potential to think through and embed some of the principles we're exploring today. So the Department of Education, the Department for Digital Culture, Media and Sport are working together with their arm's-length bodies to create a national plan for cultural education. And my hope, if I had a magical policy wand, which I often wish that I do, is that this could act as a framework to bring together all partners in the sector, from investors like Burberry to expert organisations like the Ideas Foundation to researchers like King's, around the delivery of some shared outcomes for children and young people and their access to high-quality cultural and creative learning, so that it serves to ensure that experiences like this become universal to all our children and young people in the country at all stages of their education. That's my provocation.
Thank you, Lizzie. And just to underline what a huge moment this is, that all those different government departments are working together on that plan.
Yeah.
Huge potential. Thank you. Sarah Gregory, Head of Diversity and Inclusion at Creative UK, the industry body for the creative industries, I think.
We are, and I'm going to talk about the value of education from an industry point of view, because I think the value of creative careers are so often underrepresented and underrated, and I just want to lay out some of the facts and figures that underpin the sector that might be of interest to somebody, to all of us here. But to start by saying that creative education for me should be a fundamental human right, that every child should have access. Creative education fosters expression, self-expression, teamwork and empathy, and 93% of 16 to 18-year-olds say that studying a creative subject positively affects their mental health and well-being. Creative education opens routes to employment far beyond the creative sector, and we need creative skills to drive entrepreneurship, the next big idea, and fuel that and generate inward investment. We need to ensure that education, both at school and beyond, is an education fit for purpose, equipping young people with the skills that they need for the world of tomorrow. It's undeniable that the creative industries has a significant economic impact, £116 billion per year in 2019, which is more than aerospace, automotive, life sciences and oil and gas combined. However, the value of creativity goes far beyond our economic value, and it's really about the underlying things that the sector brings. So during the pandemic, for example, whether it was your must-watch TV series, the latest games release, or even being taught to breathe by the Royal Opera House, creativity underpinned everything that we did and was really what drove us through and helped us through our darkest days. And as change happens at ever-increasing pace, creativity helps us to engage with these possible futures, helping us to imagine and engage with what the future might hold. Without this in young people's lives, they have no vehicles with which to see their place in the world that we're building. Creative expression is a vital facet of sense of self and self-empowerment. It drives civic pride and is integral to levelling up. So missing out on a creative education could mean missing out on a creative career. And this is really serious for our sector. We already employ 3.5 million jobs dependent directly on the creative industries. And beyond the sector, there's another 1 million creative jobs in the wider economy. Pre-pandemic, we were growing 3 times faster than the general workforce, and that means that 300,000 new jobs are predicted by 2025, which is enough for the working age population of Hartlepool and Middlesbrough twice over. And with investment, up to 1 million new creative jobs will be developed by 2030, as creative employment takes for us from 7% to 14% of the population of the workforce by 2030. Young people need creative skills. The UK is facing a major creative skills shortage at the moment, with 30% of the UK government shortage occupation list being creative roles. In a study by the Policy and Evidence Centre already mentioned, they studied 35 million UK job adverts over a 4-year period and found that creative skills were in high demand across the whole economy, far beyond the creative industries. But also in research conducted by LinkedIn in 2020, they found that creativity was the most important soft skill in the economy. And that's further backed up by the World Economic Thought Forum, who list creativity in its top 10 skills, and in the top 10 skills chosen by UK businesses, who say that it's also been identified as important in protecting our global competitiveness. Creative jobs have been found to be future-proof, and creative industries with their high volume of micro-businesses, freelancers, and highly skilled project work are an archetypal of the 4th industrial revolution. 87% of workers in the highly creative sector are seen to be protected from automation. That compares to just 38% of jobs in the wider economy. Creative skills and our world-class creative education are vital to the UK's global soft power and international reputation. They're essential to unleashing innovation and driving local growth and prosperity by fueling fast-growing and future-facing industries throughout the UK. Organisations combining arts and science, the wonderful STEM, are 10% more productive and have 6% higher employment growth than companies that don't have that artistic engagement. And creative technology is growing 10 times faster than the rest of our sector, so the importance of the intersection between arts and between science and creativity are becoming even more important, with 40% of employment in the creative industries said to be technically driven by 2030. We need a future workforce to be ready for this shift, creative, critical thinkers able to adapt and operate emerging technologies in new and creative ways. The promotion of creativity in education can help young people to prepare for these workplaces of the future, to build entrepreneurial skills and to improve their future employability, both within and beyond the creative sector. However, the decline in creative education across GCSEs, A-levels and into degree entry means that these opportunities are closed to increasing numbers of young people. And this is a national tragedy. It threatens our cultural, social and our economic future. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thanks very much. And lastly, Wesley Bush, and who was actually a relatively new head teacher to one of the schools that was featured in the Burberry study, Castleford Academy.
So thank you so much for inviting me to come and speak today. You'll have to bear with me. As a head teacher, normally when I'm speaking to a large audience, I'm stood up. So being sat down feels really alien to me whilst I'm talking to you. So I hope that's okay. I think, as you've already said, Beatrice, I feel like Vicky. I've joined the party late, really. So what I want to do is give some context around Castleford Academy, and it is Castleford, not Castleford. I just want to get that across. That's the way it is. I interviewed the governor yesterday to join our governing body, a 57-year-old, a lovely lady, and she introduced herself as a Casslass. So that kind of gives you a feel in terms of Castleford. Castleford is an old mining community and is very fortunate that it has a skiing snow zone that's been put on the industrial estate. So there is a little bit of lifeblood put into the community. The community itself and the school that we have at Castleford, it's 1,500 pupils, so it's a large school. And I'm very fortunate to be the head teacher at Castleford. We have a high percentage of premium pupils, so we have 29% who are pupil premium, and then we're very high above national average in terms of type 51 schools, which means that there's a large percentage of people who are available for job seekers allowance. So when I talk about Castleford, we talk about serving a community of high levels of deprivation. And what I should say about Castleford is that they joined the project in 2018, and my assistant head, Catherine Chippendale, who I wish was here today, was a driving force behind Burberry Inspire project. And I think I wanted to talk to you about that because for the schools that took part, it really needed someone who was going to take ownership and lead with passion and drive. And as we talk about what's next, that's really important for what's happening in schools. So in 2018, the project started. In 2019, Ofsted visited Castleford Academy. And Castleford obtained outstanding. We were the first school in the country on the new Ofsted framework to get outstanding. I can't claim anything for that because I wasn't there. But what is clear, if you read the Ofsted report, it talks about you had white working class boys working with Northern Ballet, really developing an understanding of ballet. That for me is something fantastic. And it's not just Northern Ballet, it's everybody that we've worked with, which I think is really special. Then the pandemic hit, and I want to talk about the pandemic because I think that's going to raise a number of issues with our young people. We often talk about white working class boys that are an issue. I can tell you now, being at the coalface, that actually it's girls who are disenfranchised or disengaged with education, which is a real problem for us. They've just spent 2 or 3 years looking at this. And this is TikTok telling them how they should look, how they should dress, and how they should talk. And they've then come back into an academy that says, you've got to have your skirt at this length, you can't wear that makeup, and you've got to be engaged in education again. And I think as time goes by, that will be a key focus for us in terms of education. So I wanted to talk, as I talked to Lizzie as I came down, I was reading Creative Schools by Sir Ken Robinson again, because I find it fascinating. And he talks about great teachers that are engaging, they enable students, they expect the very best, and it empowers them. And I think that really is at the core of what happened with the Burberry Inspire project. They had the very best experience. And Lizzie was talking about creative culture. It talks about, the national curriculum talks about seeing and experiencing the very best of what's thought and what is said. And that's what the Burberry Inspire project did. For me, the question is, how do we make it sustainable? And how do we make sure it's not just those 8 schools in the West Yorkshire area? How do we make sure that all of those schools in Wakefield and then nationally are able to access that? And I think that's a real question for us. There are a number of challenges, and I wanted to talk about accountability measures a little bit. You'll know that 2 weeks ago, the performance tables for schools came out, and if you look on the DFE website, there is a disclosure in a red box that says, please do not compare schools. Well, you know exactly what everybody did. They compared schools straight away. The top 2 state schools in terms of progress aid. So the progress aid is the measure that's, of the 8 subjects that are picked for those students. And if your target is a 4, you get a 4, it's a 0. And then if it's a plus, it's more, and if it's a minus, it's less. So the progress 8 scores, the top school, I'm not going to name them because they're doing a fantastic job. They get +2, so effectively every pupil in their school gets above 2 grades from what they're predicted. That's unbelievable. But those top 2 schools, you cannot study GCSE drama. You can't study GCSE music. You can't do GCSE textiles. You can't do GCSE design technology. And this isn't me bad-mouthing those schools, because what they do with their young people is fantastic. But we have an accountability system, for me, that restrains the creative measures. And you were talking about that brilliantly in terms of that we don't have an accountability system that allows or pushes for our young people to really benefit from the amazing quality that the Burberry Inspire project has done. We've talked about funding already, and we're all aware about the limitations in funding. And whilst the accountability measures are the way that they are, funding will always be restricted. I sat with my finance team in April to set the budget for September, and we were in a surplus. When I returned back to the Academy on the 1st of September, I'm now in a deficit because I've got unfunded pay increases for support staff and teaching staff. So with that in place, all of a sudden, all of these amazing luxuries that I'm able to provide for our young people are being reduced. And that is a real worry for us. But I wanted to end on a good and strong point. What the Burberry Inspire project has really done for Castleford Academy is made us review our curriculum. We have created 2 hours in Year 9 for our young people to have specialist teachers come into the academy and experience high quality performance education, whether that's in the arts, whether that's in music. We've got young people in Castleford learning Latin, which is just fantastic. And then also in design technology, we're looking for our partners to really develop the creative skills within the academy. And I'm going to talk a little bit about Wakefield as well, because I think West Yorkshire and Wakefield is quite unique. If I talk to you about Production Park, you'll all look at me glazed over saying, I'm not even sure what that is. Don't worry, when I say that to people in Wakefield, they don't know what it is either. But if you ask Lady Gaga, Beyonce, Jay-Z or Coldplay, they've all been there in the past year and a half. It's the largest live events destination where they go and rehearse before they go on tour. That's at the bottom of West Yorkshire. We've just had Capita College open up in Wakefield, which is a college designed for the performing arts and creativity. And then you'll all know that Channel 4 have based themselves in Leeds now. There's almost a corridor of production. And when we talk about corridors in West Yorkshire, we often think of the M62. The M62 is now a corridor of distribution sites. Amazon have just set up a distribution site. They're all along there. And what that's providing is low-paid, low-skilled jobs for young people. It's our responsibility as educationalists to ensure the corridor of the M62 isn't their area of future. It's the corridor of Production Park, Capita College, and then Channel 4 that will really inspire our young people. Hope that's been useful today.
So, some amazing sort of treatises on the value of creative education. And yet, some big challenges. Let's go back to the Burberry Inspire case study first. To what extent would you like to see more programs like this? And perhaps you could say a bit more about some of the benefits and pitfalls there, particularly in terms of legacy and continuing, not least because it had obviously a wonderful industry partner paying for much of it, but also thinking about the sector facing changes from the Arts Council funding this week, and many other challenges that government and all of the different component parts in the ecosystem are facing. Joe, do you want to go first?
Yeah, no, I mean, obviously it was a very impressive program, and the Policy Institute's impact assessment showed that, suggested the benefits. My question about it was how scalable it is and what the costs were and what it would look like if you attempted to replicate it on anything like a national scale. And I'm not sure I heard in the presentations thus far an answer to that question of scalability. I'd be interested in if anybody had some more information about that.
Does anyone want to come back to this at this point?
I don't have like figures, but I think one of the primary objectives behind the programme was to have it so that it is replicable. But I don't have like numbers and figures to hand. But I think that was the point, is trying to make it so that it is scalable, that other schools and institutions can look at it as a model that they can kind of take on board, perhaps bits and pieces of it, if not all of it. I don't know, Heather, if you've got anything to add.
Yeah, so the design of it was so that it could be scalable, and a really good example of that is that it was scaled across to New York, so we had the exact same model replicated in schools in New York City. and it worked perfectly. So the model of, I think, the CPD, the creative artists in residence, the partnerships between the different cultural partners. And I think one of the things that you were mentioning, Leanne, was the collaboration between partners rather than competition was something which actually I think was really unique. And also the collaboration between the schools. So this whole knowledge exchange was, I think, something that can be easily replicable. It was heavily funded, I think, but I think replication of it wouldn't necessarily need the same amount of funding, but it does need that investment in the cultural partners.
I agree. I think for me, the absolute key is the seeing and the doing. So it's being inspired to then be creative. So I think it's more than having a highly experienced or a very good artistic practitioner. I think it's the link to the high quality arts organisations as well that's really kind of key.
Any other reflections on scalability or legacy? What happens to Castleford Academy next? Will you continue or?
Yeah, I was speaking earlier about, I'm in a quite fortunate position. I chair Wakefield Secondary Head, so it's a group of secondary head teachers who meet every half term. And we were talking about we need to create an ecosystem where those head teachers with people who are willing to work from the creative industry with those head teachers to make sure that we can provide this resource across Wakefield. But there has to be a place where these people can. There is a joined up place for thinking, isn't there? I was in a meeting the other week from a careers point of view, and actually, if the careers people that I was in a meeting with spoke to the people who in terms of the creative industry, with head teachers in the room, all of a sudden it's an embryonic stage of creating something that's quite exciting. But getting them in the same room is often difficult. I was talking about the presentation that took place at the Playhouse, which was fantastic. But from my understanding, I think there was only 2 head teachers there out of the 8 schools that took part in the project. That speaks volumes for itself as well, doesn't it? The impact that it had on the academies was fantastic and our young people. But when the big celebration took place, there's only 2 head teachers. Interestingly, both head teachers were ex-PE teachers as well. What does that say about those head teachers? There's a lot of work to be done, isn't there, in terms of driving forward to ensure that our young people get the very best of the creative industry in our academies and that they experience them in the curriculum, not just as an extracurriculum. Because if it's extracurricular, in the best will in the world, it's an add-on, isn't it? Especially in deprived areas where I might be a boy or a girl who has to go home and pick up my young daughter, my sister or my brother who's at a primary school. I can't stay for those extracurricular activities. And then when I go home, there might not even be a book in the house, let alone an opportunity for them to go and take part in the rugby team, the netball team, whatever it is.
And what about the role of something like Creative UK there? Because that does have quite a unique role in bringing together all those different bits of the kind of ecosystem.
There's a lot more can be done to engage with employers, to get employers to be giving back. Because actually for me, in listening to this, I think it's employers that are key in providing these opportunities, because it's those industry links that opportunity to see it, then you can be it, has to come from industry. And industry has to play a much greater role in working with the education system and engaging young people with the opportunities that are on offer, because it's not happening through policy, it's not happening through the government. We know there's a massive need to help people understand the career routes that are available to them in the creative industries. Careers information, advice and guidance isn't very good for our sector. It's a sector that's wildly misunderstood. People don't understand the value and the breadth of careers and the different routes into careers in our sector as well, I think is really important. So for me, industry needs to do more. We need more things like the Creative Careers Programme, which is thankfully going to come back at least for a short amount of time, and will re-engage the industry with schools again, because I think that reaching out directly to schools, engaging with them, being the employers in your partnerships, and the ladies are nodding, so it's been a positive experience for them, but definitely for me, more employer engagement directly with schools.
Lizzie, Joe, who's responsible for taking action? Is it employers?
Well, I think definitely it's part of that ecology. And I mean, the investment from industry in this case, I think is something that if we could find ways to replicate that, that would be extraordinary. But I'm also always really interested in infrastructure. So if you're talking about scaling something up, you're talking about making something national, how do you create an infrastructure that can support that? And I think what's interesting here is actually your role in that space, which is the people that broker and hold and have that expertise to drive that project forward. I'm sorry for colleagues that can't see, I'm pointing to the Ideas Foundation. Because actually what we're wanting is, if you want every child and young person to have access to these kind of experiences, what we need is those skilled professionals that understand that brokerage role and can hold that and make that a reality. And it's actually something that's often sort of underrepresented and undervalued in that partnership, but is often the key thing to make it happen. And I think particularly as we're sort of moving into a place where lots of our local authority colleagues, you know, are working in a very different landscape now, particularly post-pandemic, particularly in this economic climate than they were before. As you rightly alluded to, we're about to see a whole new Arts Council investment portfolio where we see a different set of arts organisations who have different roles. And hopefully, I'm crossing my fingers for an amazing portfolio for children and young people in that space. But the role of the cultural education plan that I'm looking for is to think through what is that universal infrastructure, what is needed that is light touch enough to be interpreted on a local level, but does mean that we can talk about a national offer with some confidence. So yeah, that's my thoughts on that.
Joe, anything to add?
No, well, I'm very pleased to learn about this national education plan, and I'm going to try and get involved.
Great. Delighted.
Chaired by Baroness Ball.
Good.
Colleagues, peers, friends, questions. I don't know if we have a... Sorry, 1 minute. Do we have a microphone or we just go for it? Apologies. Please, do say who you are.
My name is Paul Hudson, and thanks very much indeed for the speakers. I just wanted to make a comment, which is, I suppose, almost in the form of a footnote to the talks given by Dr. Hewlett and Mr. Johnson. You're referring to the government's obsession with STEM. You may take heart from the fact that a number of scientists, 3 fellows of the Royal Society, 2 of them, one of them is the astronomer Royal, another is Sir Paul Nurse, who won a Nobel Prize, and the third, the late John Barrow, is an astronomer. They were all very much in favour of STEAM, where the A stands for the arts. Indeed, in the case of John Barrow, who died rather early, unfortunately, in his part-time used to write plays. In fact, one of them won the Italia Prize. So you may take heart from the fact that even in the scientific community, there is support for the arts.
Any responses or further questions? Thank you.
Hi, I'm Anna Payton. I actually used to work for the Ideas Foundation. I now work for the Royal Society of Arts. And I've also been a teacher and also worked in creative industries. And the reason I give you my full CV before I ask this question is because I find it really interesting that as a head teacher, you noticed that the schools that perform, and I say that in inverted commas, the best, reduce those kind of arts-based subjects. And then in industry, you notice that it's hard to get the skills in. Being a creative, or if we're all thinking creatively, how do we circumnavigate having to do a creative subject in order to work in the creative industries? Is that a prerequisite? What can we do to communicate with young people, their parents, etc., to encourage that route despite what is provided for them in their education?
Kicking off with that. So for me, definitely better careers advice and guidance. So we are, as a sector, very degree heavy. So we have about 68% degree entry across our sector, something that we're working hard to change and to be more, have better different socioeconomic groups join the sector. But better careers advice and guidance is essential because many of the jobs that you see in our sector, many of the jobs that are in growth aren't jobs that you might see as traditionally creative. So we're a set of industries first and foremost. We have every job role, every functionality that you could possibly imagine are within the sort of microcosm of the creative industries. So there are jobs for people that want to work in business administration. There are jobs for people who want to work in hair and beauty. There are jobs for people that want to work in construction. There are a range of creative roles that are highly technical. There are a range of creative roles that are highly traditional. So really, whatever your interest and wherever you think you can come at a career route through, there are excellent careers for you within the creative industries. And it's only better careers advice and guidance and a much broader understanding of the roles that are available to young people in our sector that will begin to change. So I would definitely like to see our career advisors in schools being better informed about the opportunities that are available in our sector. I don't know if colleagues have any thoughts.
I think following the pandemic, I think you'll see that your colleagues will find that they're pushing an open door in the fact that, you know, all schools and academies are supposed to meet the Gatsby benchmarks, and providing them with careers advice and experiences that will enrich and imbue and open the eyes of those young people. And I think you'll find yourself, you are pushing an open door to get into schools and academies to promote careers.
Another question up here.
Thank you. And congrats to Burberry and everyone involved. I think that's, you know, a testament to all your great work on this project, especially the Ideas Foundation. My name's Heta. I head up social impact for Nike in London, and I was really inspired to hear about this program. One thing that I'm curious about is how Burberry will continue to be involved beyond this program, because I think that obviously you've created a very impactful model, you know, which has helped a particular area, and you've proven it with the work that the Policy Institute's done. I'm just wondering, clearly there needs to be a policy ask, you know, as we're moving through these times, in terms of how creativity is featured more heavily in education, from what everyone said, and prioritised in education. Is Burberry planning on leading that conversation moving forward? Is it something that, or like, how does this group of partners, you know, carry on? Yeah.
Yeah, a really fair question. I think it's fair to say that the relationships are long-lasting, and certainly from Burberry's point of view, although this iteration of the programme has kind of come to a conclusion after 4 years, I think those relationships are still very much, you know, will continue. And I think the foundation as well, so the Burberry Foundation, that the piece around kind of empowering youth and unlocking creativity is fundamental to everything that the Burberry Foundation stands for. So I think the iterations of this and forms of this will continue, and it's certainly, you know, there's not like a closed door after the 4 years. But I guess there does come a point where you do have to kind of draw a line, because I guess there's not kind of endless, limitless amounts of money and funding available. However, hopefully the legacy that we've created will continue. But as I say, supporting youth and empowering youth is still absolutely fundamental and a key part of Burberry's values.
Have you had much other interest from other, you know, industry partners?
Not that I'm aware of. Thank you. So not that I'm personally aware of, and as I say, I guess I'm still relatively new to the company, but I think a lot of the information around this programme is going to be readily available on our website, on the Ideas Foundation website. I guess, you know, and doing events like this, it really is kind of raising awareness of the success that programmes like this can bring. So I think hopefully there will be so many resources available for people to access that can find out more if they are interested. And of course, Burberry, our door is always open if anybody else like Nike or anybody would like to have a chat. Thank you.
Thank you. I think one final question.
Yeah, so I'm also, I'm Tom, I'm from the Royal Society of Arts as well. And yeah, I think one of the things that we're focusing on are creative skills as well. We have pupil design awards and student design awards, and looking at the ways in which we can kind of use design thinking, but actually not just from a kind of design pupil's point of view, but actually across different kind of subjects. And I think, you know, some of the things which have been mentioned around kind of the skills that you develop through creative arts and things like that, and how they can be applied. How can we, if we can't move away from the kind of traditional education topics and the lack of kind of funding for arts, how can we get creative skills into more traditional kind of subjects, and how can we actually bring those kind of design thinking or creative thinking into more traditional subjects so that we can still get those skills that are going to be needed in the near future, because a lot of the problems that, you know, pupils and students of this generation are going to have are very immediate, but the people who are developing policy and things like that aren't adjusting to them quickly enough, and we're not making the progress we need to see for the world to actually change quickly enough. So.
Please jump in a bit. So I think there's sort of two separate things there. So we talk, often when we're talking about cultural education, or we're talking about the arts, we're talking about art subjects. So we're talking about visual arts, or we're talking about music, or we're talking about drama. And then similarly, but on a different frame, we're talking about creativity. And we're talking about teaching creatively, we're talking about teaching for creativity and nurturing skills of creativity. So the kind of things that Kings were looking for. So we're often thinking about things like innovation or problem solving, exactly as you've described in terms of design thinking. So to my mind, every single subject in the curriculum should be taught creatively and for creativity. There is no reason why we should only think of creativity in terms of arts subjects, although obviously they are linked in that way. And similarly, I think every subject should have some practical learning, some theoretical learning. You know, this idea that some subjects are worth more or less in our accountability system is actually, to my mind, just nonsense, because what we want is a broad and balanced curriculum that every single subject blows the minds of our children and young people and gives them that agency to make their own meaning and move forward. So I would say, exactly as we've discussed in this project, that teacher training and development, that CPD, for anybody in schools of how to use those tools to be teaching creatively and for creativity should absolutely be there, as well as that depth of canon and learning that these colleagues are bringing in to talk about the arts and the art subjects in those space. So I'm always ambitious for all of that. That's the education system that I want to see. And I often find sometimes we look for divisions between them, and I don't think we need to.
Great. I think we have to finish soon, but perhaps each of the panellists could give one kind of final reflection on what they feel hopeful about, what they feel has the kind of the greatest promise. You've mentioned apprenticeships and this educational plan, but anything else that you'd like to sort of leave on a high note and give us?
I feel like I've just...
Sorry, Sarah, put you on the spot.
That's all right, you did. I thought I was going last. So I was going, I've got time to think of something. For me, I definitely just think we're hopeful as a country. So we have a great creative canon. We have a great plethora of creative opportunities. We have really creative young people. I just think we're missing the bit in the middle and bringing the two together. So the opportunities are there and the talent is there, and we just need to be better at marrying the two. Burberry is a fantastic example of this, but just, yeah, let's just see more of it and get industry on board with education. So that would be my final thought.
And then I think for me, it's all about small steps before giant strides. And I'm really excited about the partnerships that we've created in West Yorkshire and how we can develop those and ensure that our young people, not just for the 8 schools that took part in the project, but also how we can use other agencies and other establishments to get involved in the project and make sure that every child in Wakefield and Leeds and Kirklees and Calderdale get the same experiences that our young people did as part of the Burberry Inspire project.
Well, I'm hopeful because the creative industries are going to help drive our growth back after the pandemic. That's really crucial. But I am nonetheless worried at the disconnect in policy terms between the growth in the creative industries and the supply of talent from our educational system in them. And the government doesn't recognise the connection between the two and continues to defund courses that lead to that pipeline of talent. that is, I think, the real challenge for the education part of our system, is to make government see that connection.
And I'm hopeful when I hear those direct stories of those children and young people and the impact that this work has had on them. And I was saying to a colleague earlier that actually policy is great. It as an enabling structure that allows the children and young people and the artists and communities that work with them to thrive and to be enabled. So for me, all of this discussion that we've had and all of this work that we do is to create the best landscape for that to happen. And I'm always really inspired and hopeful when I hear such, large gatherings of people who are all trying to create those conditions to make that work.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank all of you for coming. Thank you to all our panellists for such sort of brilliant and thoughtful and hopeful provocations. So just finish with a clap. Please do join us for a drink outside, get to know each other, come and meet each other, and if you have time, have a look around the gallery. Thank you.